This video was brought to you by my supporters on Patreon. Make a pledge today for early access to content, scripts, and you might even get a video request. More patrons means polls, exclusive live streams, and more, so join the Haunted House today for as little as $1 a month. Cheers! I have absolutely no idea why I skipped over this episode when I originally reviewed Series 1. I watched it religiously as a child because it was the first Doctor Who episode I had recorded to a DVD. Yep, back when DVD recorders were a thing. I can justify not reviewing The Unquiet Dead, The Long Game, and Boomtown, but I'm just really glad I'm getting the opportunity to talk about this episode 15 years since its airing. It's entirely Rose-focused, presents a lot of interesting and philosophical concepts surrounding time travel, and is probably the most quotable Doctor Who episode of all time.
Your wish is my command, but be careful what you wish for. I did it again. I picked another stupid ape. Boyfriend trouble?
He's a failure! Born failure, that one.
Get in the church! Take me to church! Jackie Tyler, do as I say. Go and check the doors. Don't touch the baby.
I'm your dad. It's my job for it to be my fault.
How old were you, 12? Oh, it's disgusting.
The most regrettable aspect of all this is that I had no idea that this story was written by Paul Cornell, the same dude that wrote the Human Nature Family of Blood story. And now, to determine whether the episode actually sucked or not. But you all know it didn't, so get ready for some gushing. We get a quick intro to the setup of the episode, clashing the past with the present, and the Doctor takes Rose to her parents' wedding. It definitely looked a bit strange that two total strangers would be sitting in on their wedding. How did they get in? Psychic paper? Honestly though, the couple's imperfection makes some awesome moments in the story. Even the wedding itself isn't a big fantastic parade or anything, it's just a small event at a registry office, and Pete can't even remember his fiance's middle names. It starts sprinkling this idea that Pete wasn't all Jackie bigged him up to be in the opening scene. Then the protagonists arrive at the place where Pete's about to be murdered, and I really loved this smashing of the great dad fantasy we're provided with as soon as they arrive in the 80s. The grey overcast sky matched with the posters we see on this wall show a really bland and hopeless era. The build-up of disaster then starts brewing as Rose proves she can't be the hero she wants to be, frozen with fear. The increasingly stern look the Doctor pulls cranks up the intensity further. Even seeing two Doctors and two Roses on screen at once was a really great bit of filmmaking. Rose temporarily prevents the death of her father, and her prediction of everything being rosy, from now on gets slashed by the music and the reactions from the men around her. These strings that descend in pitch, accompanied by the startling slams of percussion, give this puzzling and horrifying effect. She's talking to a dead man who she's never even met before, without a clue of what to say to him, because in truth they are total strangers to each other. This creates yet another problem piled on top of the whole time travelling issue that is really hammered home by the look the Doctor gives her. Oh my god, the facial expressions Chris gives in this episode are just golden. The primary issue gets tackled after Pete drives them both to his flat. I love this idea that Rose was building up to this suggestion of saving her dad, a very human desire to save their loved ones from death, and their argument over what she's gone and done was amazing. Both points of view are understandable from a principles versus heroism perspective. Where she just thinks it's a matter of their relationship being at stake, he sees the bigger picture of what's about to unfold. The age gap is so evident by the way they talk to each other, not just in terms of performers but the characters as well. The Doctor has seen these scenarios play out time and time again, making his stupid ape comment so hard-hitting. Sadly, I'm not that keen on the whole red screen Reaper point of view shots, if I'm honest. The off-screen deaths of random people didn't really serve any purpose and are fairly laughable too. There's a nice moment in the church where loads of the guests are shown to be missing, and the father moans about the whole marriage with an ironic comment about wishing one could turn the clock back. The music here is great, and seeing people literally vanishing in front of a child's eyes is a truly awful thing for him to experience, especially because it turns out to be Mickey. It's the childlike experience of losing your parents in a supermarket, except here the parents literally vanish.
Monsters! Going to eat us! What's all monsters, sweetheart? Is it aliens?
That reveal of the TARDIS being empty as well was brutal. It's so unexplained and makes the pair feel truly trapped here until the dead man dies. There's also a great moment when the two Tylers are driving to the wedding where the radio flicks from 80s music to noughties music, and Rose even pulls out her mobile and hears the world's first telephone call, completely oblivious to how strange this must all be to Pete. This use of sound establishes time's distortion in a really unique and creative way. When the three Tylers show up at the wedding, all of their drama is wonderful. It starts with yet another near-death encounter with the car, making Pete feel like somebody's out to get him, and Rose gawking at Jackie as though a photograph has just come to life reminded me of Back to the Future. But just to see the sheer contrast between the bubbly stories Jack told Rose as a child, and now she's as angry as a wolf seeing her husband arriving at a wedding with a younger girl, it must look awful to her. They kind of say this later anyway, but I love this idea that Pete is the most unlucky man in the world, yet also the luckiest man to be given an extra few hours of life by his daughter. And then the Reapers appear in front of the church. This smug smile of Rose's says it all. Exactly what she predicted would happen has happened, but she's the only one smiling. I gotta commend the design of these bats, demons. You can see the influence of the Grim Reaper in the design of these beings because their tails look like scythes. It's a shame the tails aren't utilized in any way, but the fact they have a mouth in their belly as well is super disturbing and are completely indiscriminate about who they consume. Although why the father of the groom decided not to run inside the church makes his death feel a bit deserved for his stupidity. To top it all off, Murray Gold's music sweeps in to accompany the arrival of these terrifying beasts. This episode Suite is one of his best compositions ever, in my opinion. All aspects of the orchestra are utilized for full dramatic and horrific effect. From the childish themes to the nightmare wedding, sharp strings, a monotonous plodding piano, and chilling xylophones. Just sublime. Even after the initial attack, the Reapers are ruining everybody's day. There's a lovely succession of shots outside the church that we see. Firstly, there's this long shot of two people getting pursued and consumed, then a pram turned over, then a bicycle close-up, and then a tiny purple shoe. This sequence of shots symbolize the butterfly effect, in that the footprint Rose has left on time is having a profoundly disturbing effect on reality. Not only is Pete wearing purple, but the baby Rose is covered in the same color purple as the shoe, with autumn leaves blowing around it. Death surrounds everyone who are now isolated inside the church. Everything becomes very gothic as this holy place is the only thing protecting the people from these creatures of darkness that have now appeared. Even though we just met this wedding couple, you can sympathize with their situation. The groom's father dying and the effect it's having on them is clearly demonstrated by their reactions. As hard and tedious as human life is, the Doctor appears to yearn for that experience.
I've never had a life like that.
The emotion laid within his dialogue drives this issue home. He doesn't reject their happiness out of spite or jealousy. He has a moral obligation to save everybody because he's partially to blame for all this. He's so eager to impress Rose, perhaps with intentions of sharing this kind of life with her, that he neglected his duty as a Time Lord to retain the fabric of reality itself. Even though Pete is disregarded by everyone around him, he is still able to identify that Rose is his daughter from the future and that he is meant to be dead. This really makes him stand out amongst the rest, despite saying that she has his eyes when she obviously doesn't have the same eye color as him. These painful conversations with Pete and Rose about the future pull the heartstrings. She can't tell him he's dead, but keeps indulging this fantasy her mum brought her up with, that he was this great man that hasn't been replaced since. The conflict of how everyone perceives him clashes directly with this image and creates some seriously saddening dialogue. The Doctor then admitting he doesn't have a plan or a clue ramps up the stakes. The TARDIS key becomes an element crucial to escaping, and I think this was the closest we get to Chris Eccleston reprising his role from The Second Coming. I found it interesting that his plan to get everybody out backfired somewhat, as though the easy way out wasn't going to work. Avoiding the problem of the dead man living isn't going to resolve the issue, and only Pete and Rose truly know this. That shot of the Reaper in the church, though, is fucking gorgeous. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Not even the Doctor can withstand this creature. They even throw a tiny bit of slow motion to Rose's reaction shot to amplify the horror that's just taken place before the creature and the TARDIS vanish. The burden of Rose's responsibility is shown in this shot of her with the rest of the church in the background. Everything is now darker and grayer, as though the overcast weather outside just turned into a thunderstorm in seconds. The lighting change makes everything feel so doomed. There are even people praying in the background, but Pete moves in to make the ultimate sacrifice. This shot of him adding 2 and 2 together by the window is really great. Not a word is spoken, but the music does that familiar descent and his breathing quickens in pace. The way Pete describes the car being here for him sounds almost as though a taxi is going to pick him up and take him to heaven. It's really quite touching. Jackie and Pete's farewell is really heartbreaking too. The years of loneliness to come for Jackie are fixed and not to be undone. With the music crescendoing and the monsters disappearing, Rose can finally do what she set out to do. Be there for him in his final moments, urged on by the Doctor with the exact same words he said at the start of the story. The balance is restored beautifully. Well, sort of. I don't know how I feel about this moment at the end when we see Jackie still telling the story to young Rose as though she did actually change time, despite the Doctor saying people wouldn't remember it. The fact nobody was there for Pete and that it was a hit-and-run driver inspired Rose to save him. If those two facts are no longer the case, they wouldn't have gone on the adventure to begin with. It just seemed a bit unnecessary to me, as though there needed to be some light at the end of this very dark tunnel.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
But I did really like the final death stare Chris gives Billy. Without words spoken, you can tell he's saying, "Now you've learned your lesson, go to your room." So, did it suck? I have a real sweet spot for this episode, maybe because it was my first true experience of what happens when you mess with time.
I will mess with time!
It's still a great episode, and most of the problems I have are preferential and fairly minimal when put against the awesome story this episode brings to the table. The characters are great, Chris and the music are absolute perfection, it's shot beautifully with some really memorable monsters and an emotional tie-up by the end. I give Father's Day a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. I'd like to personally thank the following people who made this review possible. I do apologise for any mispronunciation of names here. Super Cyan Hookatul, Rhys Forgan, Andrew Hart, Oliver Geddes, Simon Grierson, Nathan Oswald, Peter Shipe, Sam Roger, Kieran Murray, Bonnie Can, Jack Ranson, Scalamonger, Labyrinth Master, Ryan Deeth, Blake, Lexi Davison, Sean Thompson, Ben Hazen, Elliot Marlowe, Liam Thomas, Invisible Watch, Adam, Karen K, Matthew Rowe Blackman, Dennis Malema, Adam Busby, Justin Getz, Juliet Trenwith, Newcastle Fan 2018 Ashley Fenner, Natasha Watmore, Daniel Shillito, Sonic Meerkat, Jim, Mia Giles, Luckland Brown, Andy, Joby1849, Luke Heptonstall, James Chudnicki, A Lonely Guy, Nikki Beckett, Kyle Quinnell, David Gerald Highland, James Fraser, Brandon Saunders, Bailey Robinson, Matthew Gashk, Grady Cashin, Hazardous Harry, Hannah Kennedy, Wesley McKee, Tharies, Harry Gamble White, James Zipney Miles, Joel Handy, Katality, Matt B, Matthew Thomas, Matt Hill, and Matthew Limer. What did you think of this episode? Leave a comment below or join us for a chinwag on the Discord server, where we'll continue this discussion.